Ever wonder how you can breathe underwater without exploding from the high pressure air from your cylinder? Well, there is an unsung hero that takes cylinder gas and makes it breathable. It's called the gas regulator. But here's the shocker. Most divers I meet can't explain the difference between regulator types, let alone which one fits their diving style best. And honestly, it's more complex than it seems at first glance. I'm Don, and I spent years diving across the globe, testing all sorts of regulators in all kinds of conditions and configurations. In this video, I'm breaking down everything you need to know about this essential bit of kit, from the different components and configurations to the features that actually matter depending on where you are and how you dive. And just quick note, I'll be using some of my own gear or gear I've borrowed from others as examples, but this isn't trying to sell you on any particular brand or my setup. It's about giving you the clarity and confidence to find your perfect regulator system. That's my goal. So let's dive in. First up, let's talk about the engine of your regulator and overall scuba gear, the first stage of your regulator. This little marvel is what takes that pressurized air from your tank and turns it into something your lungs can actually handle underwater. This is the piece that connects to your gas cylinder. The first stage functions like a pressure relief valve in a high-performance engine. It takes the intense pressure from your cylinder when full, typically around 3000 psi or 200 bar, and reduces it to a more manageable intermediate pressure of around 135 to 145 psi or 9 to 10 bar, in which it connects to via hose into a thing that you breathe out and into, called the second stage of the regulator. Two main designs dominate the market: the piston and the diaphragm first stages, which I'll show for you on screen. This one here is a diaphragm stage. Piston regulators are the most common and use a simple, direct mechanism where high pressure air pushes against a spring-loaded piston, delivering impressive air volume. Some swear this makes breathing easier. Being simpler, you would think it means more reliable. However, while in some ways it's a little true, its internal mechanism remains exposed to water, creating potentially more wear and tear to internal mechanisms if you're not good at cleaning it. This does make maintaining them easier and cheaper though. They can be less bulky than diaphragm first stages. Diaphragm first stages employ a flexible membrane that separates internal mechanisms from water. While typically delivering slightly less air volume, it's not noticeable to many. They also offer superior protection from contaminants and cold water, a crucial safety feature in murky or colder environments. Diaphragms are also always balanced, meaning the ease of breathing remains the same with full and near empty tanks and not dependent on depths. Pistons can come in both balanced and unbalanced types, so you have to pay attention to what you're buying with pistons. It's definitely a consideration, but I want to make it clear, unbalanced piston stages are still considered safe. Just a bit harder to breathe from at depth or when tank pressure is low. And also what's cool is you can always tell what kind of regulator you're dealing with even if you don't know the brand. If you can kind of spin it around and look inside of it, then you're probably dealing with a piston. If you can't see inside of it and there's no holes or gaps into it, then you're probably dealing with a diaphragm. Easy to remember. So, who wins? Honestly, there is no clear winner, each with varying pros and cons. Diaphragms can be more reliable because they are not exposed to the corrosive salt, but it's also more expensive and complicated to maintain, and more costly. Because it is sealed, it is capable of performing better in cold water. On the flip side, they can be a touch harder in general to breathe from at depth than a balanced piston first stage. Not by much, and probably not noticeable, but supposedly it can be. So it's really gonna come down to your own personal unique needs. Pistons are often considered cheaper and effective on a budget. Both technologies are highly competitive and the difference is often minimal to you. Both are effectively safe for recreational diving. Reliability defects are usually down to owner's lack of maintenance. So unless you're getting into tech or more specialized type of diving, honestly, you'll be probably okay doing either one. Speaking of cold, if you're feeling adventurous and thinking of diving under ice or in waters below 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius, go for a diaphragm first stage. Since it's sealed, it's much less likely to freeze and go into free flow mode, which is when your air continuously streams out, rapidly depleting your tank. That's right, air can freeze in your regulator in very cold conditions. So if you're diving in cold waters, I want you to double check your regulator is okay to be used in cold waters. Specifically, it doesn't have to be a diaphragm, because I do know some piston models say that they're also cold compatible. You just need to make sure the regulator you buy is cold compatible. Don't try to take a non-cold compatible regulator in freezing water. I want you to remember that it matters. A couple more points to call out before we move on is how many ports your first stage has. These ports have a bolt screwed in them out of the box. Keep those bolts, don't lose them, as they will give you flexible options for configuring your first stage down the road. If you take something out, you always have to put that bolt back in. You will have 1 or 2 lower ports, or in the middle kind of, for high pressure or HP. These are basically your high pressure ports for reading the air in your tank. You can see this goes straight to my air gauge, or SPG rather. If you have 2, which I do on this one, you can have a physical SPG gauge and an air integration sensor at the same time. This creates redundancy in case one fails, like the air integration, which is not too uncommon. So it is nice to have 2 high pressure ports for that reason. The upper ports I have on this turret here are your low pressure ports, or LP ports, also sometimes called the intermediate or medium pressure ports. These are where you get your air for everything else. For most configurations, you'll want at minimum 2 LP ports dedicated for your second stages. For side mounts and such, you need at least 1, but for most divers you want 2. And then you'll have 2 others, usually one dedicated for a BCD and 1 dedicated for a dry suit. Not everyone's going to use that dry suit one, but you'll be glad to have it if you do ever decide to try dry suit. So I usually would recommend looking for at least 4 ports here. There are some other first stages that offer medium pressure ports, or MP, that is designed for higher intermediate pressure than low pressure ports. So high pressure ports will be unbreathable for you, and the same pressure as the gas remaining in your tank. Low pressure ports will range ideally around a comfortable breathing range of 135 to 145 psi, or 9 to 10 bar. The MP is a larger low pressure port, able to have a higher flow for a high performance second stage. Some regulators that sold with the MP are out of the market. The MP standard is kind of fading in history, but I want you to know about it, and maybe it'll come back someday. Most modern regulators just have HP and LP ports, while both LP and MP would be intermediate pressure ports for you to breathe from. We are mostly looking at LP ports to be synonymous with IP, or intermediate pressure ports, these days. And intermediate pressure ports is what you can breathe from. It might be confusing, so just remember, LP is the same as IP for your second stages, and BCD and dry suit. And HP is just for SPGs and integrated air sensors. Really, anything that tells you pressure of your cylinder. If you do find an MP, it's just a bit more intense than an LP and meant for your primary second stage, and generally will have a better flow rate for you. Also, one more for you. Some regulators have a label on them called BC, which just means it's an IP for your dry suit or BCD. Wow, that's a lot of stuff, because there's been a lot of variation over years, and I just want you to be familiar with it. By the way, some regulators have the LP ports on a swivel turn like this. It's a nice feature, and what I'm about to tell you, there is no right or wrong here. Some will swear by these. They're flexible for different hose routing setups since you can move that swivel in any direction you want, which tends to be especially important in some configurations like side mounts. The correct way, hypothetically, is to have the swivel pointing up from your tank. So if your tank is here, this should be on top. This allows you to use that swivel as designed. You can very well flip it the other way, so this hard surface is on top. And the reason why you might consider doing this is because this hard surface can take a much harder impact on top of your tank and protect your regulator, especially if you're in overhead environments like a cave or a cavern where you could potentially have a hard impact on the surface of this. And this will protect your regulator more. So you could have the swivel part pointing down to create a better protected surface on top. There is no right or wrong there. I just want you to be familiar with both. Of course, you might want to optimize your comfort, or you might want to optimize protection of your gear. And so the choice is yours. Neither is necessarily wrong. You can choose for yourself which way you'd like to have your regulator. First stage. The next big question is, how does your first stage connect to the tank? You've got two options here, DIN or Yoke. There's so much to say about these that I'll be covering these in a different video that's dedicated to that subject. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to catch it. And do me a favor and like this video if you are enjoying it. For now, know this. It often depends where you dive, which will substantially increase what you can expect to see. For example, in Europe, they mostly use DIN. In the Americas, they lean more Yoke. It's not a hard and fast rule, but in general. It will somewhat depend on what kind of tank cylinders you're going to be using or renting. But I personally prefer to use a DIN first stage. And with DIN, you can actually use an adapter for DIN to a Yoke cylinder, which is great. You cannot take a Yoke regulator and adapt it to a DIN cylinder. So the DIN connector on your first stage regulator is a little more universal. Of course, as all things, some avoid adapters for peace of mind, as it can be a failure point. But I've never seen one fail, and if you're worried, you can always buy a separate Yoke and DIN regulator for each. You can always solve all your problems with more money and more gear. Regardless, DIN tends to have some extra mileage because it is a newer standard and deemed to be a bit safer. It can support higher tank pressures and can use an adapter for Yoke, as I mentioned earlier, while of course Yoke cannot adapt for DIN. Most modern regulators are good to use up to 40% oxygen out of the box, which is needed for nitrox gas mixes. But to go higher, you'll need to shop for a special oxygen clean regulator. Also, with regulators used for nitrox above 40%, it's also important to always use oxygen-safe lubricant for O-rings, such as Tribolube or Crystolube. Otherwise, it's fine to use much cheaper silicone lube for anything 40% or less. Last, but definitely not least, let's talk about the maintenance. Most manufacturers recommend servicing your regulator once a year by a professional servicer. Some models stretch to every 3 years, but follow the specific guidelines for your gear. Read the manual when you buy it, and track when you've last done the maintenance on it. Ideally somewhere with your dive log, or wherever, just make sure you're tracking it. Also, make sure you can get your regulator serviced locally at a local dive shop. Buying a great regulator is exciting, but when you find out you have to ship it across the world for an annual tune-up and be out of diving commission for maybe a month or two, no thanks. All right, now that we've gone deep, pun intended, on the first stage, let's swim over to those hose configurations, the real game changer of the scuba diving gear. All these hoses are going to connect to your first stage of the regulator, and if you're purchasing your regulator or trying to figure it out, there are several hose routing configurations that are worth knowing, and I want you to know it. Often a lot of regulators will come with pre-packaged hose arrangements, but I want you to know what you're buying. Further, you can customize your regulator afterwards, and so I want you to know what you can customize it to. It's important to note that it's optimal never to have your hoses longer than they need to be, as they can present entanglement hazards and unexpectedly caught on something tugging your second stage right out of your mouth. Extra hose length makes the setup a bit heavier too. A quick note is that HB and LP hoses are different and have different threads on them, so they cannot be accidentally used or screwed into the wrong port. But you'll want to make sure you're buying the right kind of hose you need. Generally, HB hoses run about 7/16 inches or about 11 millimeters, while LP ports run about 3/8 inches or 9.5 millimeters. If you do run across one of those MP or high flowing ports, they have different threads too, which are about 1/2 inch or 12.7 millimeter. Hoses will have different types of connectors on them too, depending on if you're using it for a second stage, like one of these, or if they are for your BCD or dry suit. They will have a quick release connector. So if they have one of these things that you can pull, it's a quick release mechanism. An important distinction when you're buying hoses, because these are not compatible. This one screws into a regulator, this one has a quick connector release. So that's how you can kind of tell the difference between the two types of hose connections. And I'm gonna make a very broad comment here and say there are about 4 different types of hose connections. And I know there's going to be a lot more than that, but I'm going to make a broad stroke here and categorize them into 4 general top level categories for this video. Sure, there are probably more, especially with the fancy rebreathers and various side mount configurations. But let's stick with the big 4. Most new divers start out with what I'll call the standard recreational configuration. In this setup, your first stage is behind your head. Both your main and backup second stages are routed on your right and are generally not very long and have very similar length. The backup second stage can be a bit longer, as this will go into your pocket or be somewhere dangling in kind of a triangle under your chin to your shoulders or to the side shoulder straps. You can kind of imagine a triangle here, and it should be somewhere in that triangle for a out of air diver to locate, because that backup is primarily there just in case your primary fails or if you need to air share with someone else. You'll have your BCD and dry suit connections around on the left side. It's simple, clean, and works great for most recreational dives. But there's another popular setup, mostly in the tech diving community, that I want you to know about. And some regulators may come pre-configured this way. It's called the Hogarthian, or most commonly referred to as the long hose setup. And that's what I generally call it, the long hose setup. This actually is the setup I use, and here's why. First, the backup regulator is on a short hose on your right side and is held in place by a necklace. So it's very consistently in one spot. So as long as you put that necklace on, first thing, it's always gonna be there. It's right here. It's easy to locate. This might sound minor, but some divers have died because they could not find their second stage after falling into the water. The necklace really does help with that, and it could save your life. That's one plus of this setup. More importantly, the main regulator is on an extra long 60-inch or 150 centimeter long hose. That's pretty long. This enables you to practice air sharing, or if you're in a real emergency where someone is out of air, you can donate your regulator right out of your mouth calmly, but to keep the panic diver away from the rest of you. In a real out of emergency situation, the panic diver can be very dangerous, and so to take this right out of your mouth, donate it, and then have the length to just let the diver cool down away from you is a real nice feature for you and the panic diver. Then you put your necklace back up in and allow the diver to calm down on the long hose. The extra slack of the line usually just runs under your waist belt, or some divers prefer a hose retainer off the waist somewhere. Those hose retainers can be a little bit more expensive than you imagine, so it's very popular in the dive community to 3D print one, which I have one and it's pink and I use it sometimes, but I've been favoring more just putting it under the waist belt now. This setup is more popular amongst the tech and cave diving community because it does give you options with that long hose setup to get out of an overhang environment. But honestly, I think it's awesome for wreck diving too. Sure, there is a bit of a learning curve with handling this long hose and making sure you don't smash your second stage on that long hose, but it's manageable. While there's no scientific consensus which is safer, most of the tech community lean toward the long hose. But I'm not saying that either is right. Both come with pros and cons. And either way, practice your out of air drills so whatever setup you choose becomes second nature. And that's the most important thing. You master your setup. Whatever setup it is, as long as you're comfortable with it, you're probably safer than most that are uncomfortable and unfamiliar. Now, let's talk about a more uncommon but semi-popular, especially among solo divers or divers that travel a lot, where their dive kits will combine their backup second stage into an inflator hose. These are like Air 2 shares and they have different other brands. I don't use them myself, but some people swear by them. And I want you to know, more importantly, that it is an option and on pros and cons behind this option. Because you're cutting out an extra hose and second stage, you're gonna be a lot more streamlined with one inflator hose. You're gonna have the inflator hose anyways. And in this setup, this inflator hose is gonna be a lot bulkier than this. It's gonna be a little bit more complex. It's gonna be a second stage regulator. You can breathe out of it. And also, divers who swear by it will say that, it's better, less hoses, less routing, more streamlined for them. And maybe also importantly, less weight when you travel. It's compact. I can see the appeal from it. While I absolutely don't recommend these for beginners, if you're comfortable with what you're doing, it can be fine. Largely, the community does consider a second stage regulator and a inflator hose in one piece is a higher risk area. So take it for you will. Inflator hose is already kind of a high risk device. These buttons can stick on you and create a real emergency that you have to deal with, a gear emergency. And having a regulator built into this just makes it a little bit complex. So pick your battles, and I understand why some people prefer these. I personally have not read any incidents around them, so I would deem them mostly safe. No one has died from it, at least that I know of, so they are safe. But still, I do think they're complex enough that I personally have chosen not to use them. And if you find yourself in need of air and you approach a diver with no clear secondary backup to give you, which by the way, I think I forgot to say earlier, the backup second stage is often called an octopus. So if you see a diver without an octopus, then they might hand you an inflator hose, which might feel a little strange, but probably if they're handing it to you, it means it's a regulator that you can breathe from. There is a bit of inconsistency with this configuration and maybe no standards. So likely a diver will either hand you this inflator hose, and it could be a very long inflator hose, or they're gonna hand you the regulator from their mouth and then switch to their inflator hose. And the one that they hand you from their mouth might be on a long hose setup. So there's options. And I'm gonna put this away. Next up is the side mount setup, where divers wear their tanks at their sides rather than on their back. Most often done with 2 cylinders, each with their own first and second stage. So if you ever want to go side mount, you have to get more gear. But what's nice about that is extra redundancy. Each tank operates independently, which has some nice features that come along with that. These divers will switch breathing from both second stages, which will allow them to breathe from both tanks, and they're breathing them down evenly so they're not unevenly balanced. The big perk here is built-in redundancy, 2 tanks, 2 regulators that can be life-saving in emergency, especially in tech or cave diving environments. I've personally gone diving with my wife in side mount, and one of her second stages started free-flowing once we got down at depth. We would have normally had to abort immediately, but we were able to just turn that tank off And we did do a much shorter dive, but we're able to still enjoy some of the dive rather than aborting right away. So it gave us options, and that's the nice thing about redundancy. But importantly, the tanks will also have a long hose setup with one regulator and the other with a necklace, and donating air will basically be similar to what I described earlier with the long hose setup. It's the same, except since the side mount diver will be basically switching between regulators, their long hose regulator may not be in their mouth. So they will get their long hose and give it to you if it's not in their mouth. The out of air diver has 50% chance of that long hose being in the mouth or not. While if you're diving single tank, you generally don't switch. There's no reason to. So you probably will just have the long hose in your mouth all the time. While of course the side mount will be switching, and so they might have to unclip the long hose and hand it to the diver. The rule of thumb, if you're out of air, don't grab a regulator from someone's neck. If they have a regulator on their neck and you're asking for out of air, they will hand you one on a long hose, either out of their mouth or on a clip. Usually a nice breakaway clip. So if an emergency, you can grab it and it'll probably be fine. But you'll be awfully surprised if you grab the one in your neck because it's not that long. You're gonna have a really frustrating time getting air out of that. They will have a long hose setup for you. And so in general, these are the main setups you'll see. But don't be surprised if people tweak things here and there. Everyone has their preferences. The most important thing is when you're starting to dive with new people in a group or doing your buddy check, ask. If you don't see something you're familiar with, ask. It's important to always be clear at the start of the dive how you're going to deal with an emergency air share. So just always communicate, especially with a custom configuration that I may not have covered today or that just looks unfamiliar to you. It never hurts to ask. It could save your life or someone else's life by asking. Now, we cannot properly cover the hose configurations if we don't talk about hose material. Today, there are two major types. The first being the most common, which is these rubber hoses. Heavy, cheap, but durable. Then there is the modern braided hose, which comes in a variety of materials, but most popular being MyFlex. You might have heard the internet drama about MyFlex hoses being unsafe in the past, but this is due to early manufacturing practices and competition for lower prices sacrificing quality. These days, if you buy from a trusted seller, you should be fine. But hey, do your homework and don't skimp on quality if you're buying these aftermarket or off the internet. The benefits of MyFlex is that it's stronger, lighter, and more flexible, and more UV resistant than rubber hoses. It's also more expensive, but can come in a number of cool, bright colors. These you'll probably just get black and yellow if you're lucky, like this one here. But MyFlex, you can get all sorts of different cool colors like this one in blue. I'll probably customize my setup a little bit more in time, but this one is a nice blue one. And it comes in all sorts of different bright colors. If you want to match your fins to your hoses, who am I to stop you? Dive fashion is real. Maybe you want to go all hot pink. Just a reminder, all hoses wear out over time, rubber or braided. So it's important to inspect them and replace them after they start showing signs of wear. If you're buying used, carefully inspect those hoses. It's not a deal breaker if they have wear, but you will want to buy new ones before using it. One other thing with hoses too is sometimes regulator kits will come with hose protectors that are meant to keep hose from bending around the first stage. They are thick and don't come off easy. Honestly, they don't provide much benefit, and the general advice is to have these removed. This is because they really don't protect the joint as much as you'd think, and more importantly, they get in the way of cleaning the connection, increasing the risk of corrosion, and the corrosion will cause a lot more wear and tear on your regulator than this thing can protect. So if you're buying from a shop, you can request to have these removed, or on your next service. You can do it yourself, but honestly, I probably wouldn't recommend it. Just maybe ask to do it on your next regulator servicing. they will require some pretty strong and specialized cutters. If you don't want to have them removed, like I don't have these removed, pull them back from the connections where the metal is, so that these can be cleaned with fresh water every single time you finish your dive. As long as it's pulled back away from the metal, it's fine. But of course, it kind of makes it a little pointless and it adds a little bit of weight. So you could have those removed, and I'll probably remove these, but I wanted to have them on here for this video. And by the way, if you can't get enough diving, I am starting a newsletter to cover the latest and greatest scuba news, which I am just not able to keep up with all the news on my channel. So I'm gonna start a newsletter, which you can subscribe to, unsubscribe to anytime. Check it out, the details in the description below. And I super appreciate you if you go ahead and smash that like button, because the YouTube algorithm will push out this video to more people the more they like it. And I truly support you if you support this channel and support this video by hitting that like button. Okay, let's talk about the part of your dive gear that you'll be literally face to face with. Your second stage regulator. This thing can make or break your jawline. Literally. The secret isn't always in expensive materials or adjustment knobs that the manufacturers and resellers love to highlight. Your second stage's main job is to resist intermediate pressures coming from your first stage and ensure it doesn't free flow, while still ensuring the moment you breathe in, breathable air will be there for you. This is what is typically called cracking pressure. It's a delicate balance, as the pressure needs to be enough to resist ambient pressures while diving, but still be easy enough to deliver air when you inhale. If your regulator is facing down when you hit the water and starts free flowing, this is because the pressure of the water was high enough to exceed the cracking pressure, which is what it is designed to do. So if it starts free flowing, all you have to do is turn it the other way. And this is the sensitive part to that pressure, that cracking pressure. So remember, if you jump in the water and your second stage starts going crazy on you and spraying air everywhere, just make sure to flip it the other way. This part's the sensitive part, so like this if it's on your neck. The mouthpiece, which may look like a simple chunk of rubber or silicone, might be the most underrated factor in your diving comfort. Studies show that size, shape, and material of our mouthpiece dramatically impact jaw fatigue during extended dives. And you can kind of see that I have a whole bunch of varying mouthpieces here, and some are a little bit better than others, for sure. There are some, like this one, that have inner layer that hugs the roof of your mouth, so you don't need to bite the mouthpiece, which helps a lot. It helps a lot. I've heard some prefer custom molded mouthpieces that mold to their mouth, their own mouth, which makes it a little bit comfortable as well too, at the cost of a little additional price. But if you're looking for an easy upgrade, I do recommend something like this, because these generally work quite well and reduce jaw fatigue considerably. Experiment with these. You can buy these separate from whatever the second stage comes with to eliminate your jaw fatigue. Next, let's talk about how too many divers obsess over the breathing performance ratings while overlooking this critical element that affects every breath. One of the primary aspects between second stages tends to be how well it performs at delivering air. But the feeling of how it delivers air might be very subtle. Lab tests show performance differences between mid-range and premium regulators become measurable only under extreme conditions. In normal, recreational diving, a well-designed mid-range regulator with a comfortable mouthpiece typically provides a more enjoyable experience than a top-end model with poorly designed ergonomics. So just to let that set in, it's more important for your regulator to be comfortable in your mouth with the setup than it is for the high performance breathing. Of course, price tags on second stages can start climbing very fast when you start talking about breathing performance. Fancier models often offer smoother breathing at depth. This won't affect your air consumption, but rather ease of breathing, as in how hard you need to pull for air to be delivered. Then you've got the ultra high-end models with servo control valves, fancy, futuristic, and whisper smooth. Personally, I've never used one, and honestly, for recreational divers, the steeper maintenance curve and price just isn't worth it. They're like the Lamborghinis of the second stages. Cool to look at, but unnecessary to drive to the grocery store. Still, sometimes it's nice to have a Lamborghini for some, so I can understand. And for some specialized diving, this high performance might be necessary, but we're talking about recreational diving here. In fact, most high flow may not have a large impact on your dive experience. Your best bet, visit a dive shop, try a few out. The difference often comes down to personal preference for the feel. But what about these adjustment features that manufacturers really love to highlight? The truth is more nuanced than the marketing suggests. Adjustable airflow and venturi controls are like specialized tools, valuable primarily during technical dives or challenging conditions, but often unnecessary for recreational diving in stable conditions. An airflow adjustment knob is used to dynamically adjust how hard it is to breathe from the second stage. It may be useful in current diving where it starts free flowing due to the current pressure, or if you are deep dive and find the regulator hard to breathe from, particularly if the first stage is unbalanced. Some prefer to have the knob at full resistance to ensure it's harder to free flow for, let's say, when you start to dive and you begin with a splash. Typically, and then while on the dive, you switch it to max, and that makes sure that you can get air freely from your regulator. So this is useful in that case because you can turn the knob all the way to increase the cracking resistance to full to reduce the chance that it's going to start free flowing when you enter the water. And once you're in the water and start your dive, you can change it to full. The venturi control is a lever or a knob that can be automatically or manually adjustable, even if there's no exposed knob for it. Typically, you can open the second stage and adjust it manually. This controls the ease of breathing when you inhale, regardless. So even if it's not externally controllable, often you can adjust it internally. So it is really there just for on-demand and dynamic changes if you need them. Regardless of the knob, breathing should never feel hard from your second stage. You want it to feel relatively easy to ensure you're getting plenty of oxygen as you breathe from it. If it's getting too hard, you could be breathing more carbon dioxide buildup from your exhalations than fresh oxygen, especially if you're not breathing deeply. And carbon dioxide can cause a huge headache and just make you miserable on the dive, if not be a danger to the diving experience. Some divers might think that making it harder to breathe from might actually help their gas consumption, but this is incorrect, as it's more dangerous due to that carbon dioxide buildup. So it's very important that you always adjust this thing so that it's easy to breathe from. Never make it hard. Never. Easy to breathe from as possible. So generally, this external knob, I've never really had to dynamically change it on a dive. So honestly, I rarely use this in my dives. So I wouldn't really recommend it very high on the list of features to look for in a second stage, assuming you're looking for a good one for recreational diving. It's not really that important, but if it comes with the one that you're eyeballing anyways, it doesn't hurt. Another factor that might affect what you're looking in for a second stage is if you need your second stage to perform in cold water. And I'm talking about that cold water, that freezing water I was talking about earlier. Just as we talked about with the first stage, the second stage can also freeze up in cold water. So it's important that if you're going to cold water, and I'm talking about freezing water, both the first stage and second stage are capable of freezing. So you need to factor that in if you're buying your regulator set and that both are compatible with cold water. Now, let's talk about the connection joint. There are several options available where your second stage can plug straight into your hose. So it's important to see that this one is a regular connection. It's straight. And sometimes if you put it at an angle, the rubber hose can be fighting the resistance of putting this in your mouth. You see, it has some push And over a long dive or even repetitive dives, that can cause a lot of jaw fatigue. So if you're using rubber hoses and it's slightly too long or at a weird angle, it can create a very uncomfortable tug on the mouth. This leads to more jaw tension and more bite force, and your mouth ends up paying the price. The fix is to get a swivel or elbow joint on your second stage between the hose and the second stage. Of course, this is an extra mechanism in your system, so it can be seen as a failure point. But for the level of comfort and potential safety, most feel it's worth it. There are two main types, and that is the 110 or 70-degree joint. But these will put an angle on the way the second stage sits, attached to the hose, making it more comfortable, like this. So instead of it pulling, it's in a route straight behind my head like this, and that's nice. Then there is the 360-degree omni joint swivel, which I don't have to show you here, but I want you to know about it. Some think it's slightly riskier than these elbow joints. The 360-degree is the most flexible, but again, it's a higher potential failure point, so you have to assess your risks. Regardless, I've heard good things about them. And whether you go with the elbow joint or the swivel, both are potential failure points. Just some think the omni swivel is slightly higher risk than the elbow. And many divers will choose to get the swivels for at least their main regulator, or just go with an elbow bend as they are a touch less risky. And by some chance, if either of these do fail, it won't be catastrophic. You'll see a free flow from the elbow and you'll lose air, but not super rapidly. You'll have enough time to get to the surface, and if needed, you can share air with your buddy. There is a small price to pay for the comfort from this joint. And I have, in my diving experience, seen these elbows break an O-ring twice. So they are failure points. It's worth calling out. There are ways to mitigate it, which may be beyond this video, but I do want to call them out. I obviously use them and I accept that, but I also want you to consider if you're comfortable with that as well. Next, weight is another crucial factor. Heavier second stages create a constant tension on your jaw muscles, gradually building fatigue, and becomes genuinely uncomfortable halfway through the dive. This is why manufacturers have shifted towards lighter weight materials, not just as a marketing gimmick, but as a practical comfort enhancement for longer dives. Material selection serves multiple purposes. In cold environments, metal second stage bodies offer superior thermal conductivity compared to plastic, preventing freezing when compressed air rapidly expands inside the regulator. Some advanced models incorporate heat exchangers specifically for these challenging conditions. As for exotic materials like titanium, they're light, strong, corrosion resistant, but wildly expensive. But their performance benefits rarely justify their price tags for the average diver. And let's not forget the second stage exhaust valve, which ensures water doesn't seep into the second stage and expels your exhalation when you breathe out. There is also a purge button on the front of it, which will expel anything inside the second stage out, allowing air to fill it and push content like water or something from being a little, seasick out with the regulator. So if you ever do get seasick, the most important thing is don't take your regulator out. You can just do your thing into the regulator and purge it out like this for safety. Don't take it out unless it's needed. These features are straightforward, and almost all second stages come with that purge button. And as far as I know, the standard across second stages is pretty similar with minimal differences to the diving experience. A quick word on color. In general, your primary second stage can be whatever you want, but the tradition says yellow is typically reserved for the color of the regulator you are prepared to donate to an out of air diver. In an emergency, people are trained to grab a yellow one. Just to let that sink in, your primary that you're going to be used on a single tank setup can be whatever color. Generally not a bright color, and generally more acceptable, maybe just make it black. Your octopus should be yellow or it also can be black. But yellow tends to signify that it's ready, it's the one that's going to be donated. So just keep that in mind. It's not a firm standard, but a lot of people do use it. And I, somewhat ironically, do have my backup octopus on the yellow necklace, which is far from ideal. And I'll probably fix it eventually. Regardless, this is a rule of thumb and a consideration for you and your setup. Beyond yellow, I think you can feel free to find the craziest color and match those pink fins. Now, here's a mistake I've seen and made myself. Some divers cheap out on their backup octopus second stage regulator, assuming they'll never need it. Bad idea. Think of your backup as equally important. It should also be comfortable, reliable, and well maintained. In a real emergency, if you're switching to it, you're probably going to be stressed, or someone else is going to be stressed that you just donated to. You want that thing working reliably. Otherwise, the situation could just escalate higher and further out of control. If possible, get the same model for both your main and backup. That way, you're always ready, no matter which one you're breathing from. Plus, spare parts for either can be interchangeable. Alright, now that we've gone deep into the world of regulators, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Picking the right regulator is really about finding what works best for you and your dives. There's no absolute right or wrong setup. I'm not telling you to do it right. I'm trying to give you all the information for you to find what works best for you. There are premium features at a premium cost. But remember, expensive doesn't always mean it's better. You've now got the tools to confidently buy a pre-made regulator kit or assemble your own and be able to identify what your fellow divers are using, including all that nonsensical jargon. I did my best to be comprehensive with this video to help ensure you are aware of all the different setups and can make the best buying decisions. But hey, if I forgot something or you've got a tip of your own, drop it in the comments below. And if you're regulator shopping, chances are your eyes are drifting towards BCDs too. Guess what? Click on this video where you can learn the truth about BCDs nobody's told you. And until next time.